Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whatever your time zone. Welcome. This is Digital Transformation Talk, and I am your host, Kevin Crane. Welcome to the show. Today, we are here to talk about transforming your digital enterprise through responsible AI. Now, of course, we hear a lot about AI, especially now with the emergence of ChatGPT and other generative AI. But what is responsible AI and how does it differ from just normal AI? Well, responsible AI is the practice of designing, developing, and deploying AI with good intention to empower employees and businesses. By adopting responsible AI, organizations aim to instill the virtues of trust and transparency in their work environment and with consumers, essentially policing and normalizing the behavior of the organization while designing and using AI systems and solutions. It sounds pretty straightforward, but this is really pretty heavy stuff and an area of business and society that we really need to consider and rectify, regulating our technology in a sense and our approach to using it by developing AI that is transparent across business processes and functions and ensuring that sensitive data and customer information is never used unethically. Developing responsible and ethical AI can reduce organizational bias among employees and reduce associated errors by ensuring that a sense of uniformity and awareness is integrated in the artificial intelligence technology. And listen, all of this is incredibly important because artificial intelligence is reshaping business and indeed society today. It holds incredible promises, but incidents of misuse or misdeployment can diminish public trust and draw attention from regulators. And indeed, emerging regulations for AI systems, such as the EU AI Act and the Canadian Data and AI Act, are planning financial penalties up to 6% of revenue and even criminal punishment for non-compliant systems. The New York City law on automated employee decision tools carries a penalty of up to $1,500 per violation, per user, per day. So organizations not thinking about responsible AI are at increasing risk, not only from a regulatory point of view, but also from the point of view of public trust. So, what should we do about this? That is what we will be discussing today with a great panel of guests. But before I introduce our guests and our news article for today, I do want to say that we want to hear from you too. We'd like to encourage everyone attending today to participate. So please join in with your comments in the chat section. And if you have a question along the way for our guests, please enter them into the Q&A feature and I will attempt to get them into the flow of the show. And we'll have a few minutes also at the end for your questions. So with that, let's bring aboard our guest panel today, starting with Martin Miller. Martin is former director of AI and machine learning for production operations at Levi Strauss. Martin, are you with us?
I hope I'm with you, Kevin. I'm glad to
There
be.
you are. Where are you calling in from, Martin?
I'm calling in from the San Francisco Bay Area, actually from the East Bay, Pleasanton.
Nice, wonderful. Welcome aboard. Also joining Martin is Chanchal Chatterjee, senior deep learning software leader at NVIDIA. Chanchal, are you with us? There you are, sir. Please
Okay.
unmute. There we go. Chanchal, where are you calling in from?
Yeah, I'm calling in from Sunnyvale, San Jose area, which
All
is
right.
very close to where Martin is, actually.
I left my heart in the Bay Area. All right. And not least or last, Tessa Derbyshire, Data and AI Value Strategy Manager at Accenture. Tessa, welcome aboard. Where are you calling in from?
Hey Kevin, thanks. I'm dialing from London, so significantly further away.
All right. Well, we're worldwide here today, so thank you all for joining us today. It should be a great discussion. And to start us off, I would like to draw our attention to an article published recently by Datanami. It discusses the recent state of responsible AI in financial services report from global analytics firm FICO. The report found that the demand for AI products and tools are on the rise, with more of half the respondents of the survey saying they are a higher priority than they were just a month or 12 months ago. Yet the vast majority, indeed 71%, have not implemented ethical or responsible AI in their core strategies. So my question to the group today is, given the attention on and the rising regulation of responsible AI, do you feel that organizations can continue to afford to drag their feet on responsible AI, and what are the risks of doing so? Let me start with Martin, if I could. Martin, what are your thoughts on this? Can organizations continue to drag their feet on responsible AI?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I mean, there's, the consideration of bias in how decisions are made can be detrimental. The ambiguity of some regulatory and enforcement policies can be definitely difficult to navigate. Absolutely a critical element to bring into the forefront.
So what do we do about this? Tessa, what are the risks of doing so, and what should organizations be doing with responsible AI?
I think one of the really important things about responsible AI is to regard it as an evolution of your existing data science strategy and your data governance. Often it's considered this tack on, it's hard to start, I don't know who to speak to, I don't know who my experts are, but this is ML ops, this is data ops. You are doing a lot of the work out there, and the risks are similar. It's an evolution of the same space. So it's taking a look at what's already in your existing governance structures and seeing how you can evolve, and then where perhaps the gaps are that you need expert support to fill.
This seems to go beyond the normal in terms of strategy design. Chanchal, what are your thoughts on responsible AI? And really, is it time that all organizations step up and make this a priority?
So I have worked in a few name brand companies in the Bay Area, Google and Meta, and I have firsthand seen many of the public utterances on this topic. So at Meta, we felt that the public releases clearly state that responsible AI, which is a huge initiative within Meta, has 4 pillars. So the basic point I'm trying to make is each company is pursuing it from their own perspective in a slightly different way. So for Meta, it's privacy, security, fairness, and transparency. For Google, it is more of a technology company, and there the pursuit of responsible AI is in terms of responsible AI research, responsible AI in ML, in products, in tooling. They have come up with some fantastic tooling like integrated gradients. I can talk a lot about it. Then language interpretability tools. That area, Google has done a fantastic work. What if tools. And then lastly, demonstrating AI for societal benefits. So there you can see the 4 themes are slightly in research, ML, tooling, and societal benefits, whereas the other one is more on the topics of privacy, security, fairness, and transparency. So I've seen various ways to handle the responsible AI.
The FICO study in the article also found that the number one benefit of responsible AI was improving customer experience. I was surprised perhaps by that, but this is certainly something that we have been talking about on this show. If you've been following this show, customer experience has been a prevalent topic. Delivering better experiences for customers was listed as the top benefit of responsible AI, followed by creating new revenue opportunities and protecting brand equity, minimizing risk. So corporations that undertake the process of defining and adopting responsible AI with a codified strategy that demonstrates how ethical and AI governance is being enforced stand to benefit. So what are your recommendations for leaders to do that? Tessa, what would you recommend to the C-suite?
In terms of implementing responsible AI or delivering on that customer benefit?
Yeah, both. Implementing AI with an aim to bolstering customer experience and
Yeah,
yes.
it's a great question. So I think that it's often the big promise of AI that it can improve the experience or the lives or the lived moments of individuals through personalization, through better tailoring, through better support, and through targeted intervention. Often what we're seeing is that promise is only delivered through proper governance, where you've implemented a responsible AI program that looks at the development of the model all across the data science lifecycle and makes sure that things are put in place at the beginning. So that first part as a senior leader is making sure that you're set up from the get-go, that you're not trying to play catch up on managing these models later. And then the second part's about accountability, making sure that the people who are building models on the front line, that they're empowered to make decisions and that they have clear accountability lines from them all the way up to the C-suite, so that we can be fast and agile in this space that is continually evolving.
It seems to me that responsible AI and customer experience are two maybe differing sides of the bigger coin. There's sort of the technology side, and then there's the people side, or the perception side, the market side. I'd like to ask about both. Chanchel, on the technology side, what are some of the technologies that help organizations develop a policy that ensures responsible AI and that then can be demonstrated to the public in terms of public perception?
Yeah, so that's a very interesting topic. The first point I would mention in that is transparency. I think that is one thing that drives a lot of customer satisfaction. Let's say you went to a financial institution to get a loan for $250,000, and they said, no, you can only get 175. Okay, and if the guy says your credit score is not good enough, that's not very satisfying answer. Whereas if you can give a proper analysis with the data, with the ML models that was behind this decision, to give a full disclosure of what led to this, what was the sequence of events that caused this, I think the customer will understand it better, will appreciate the decision more, will actually take corrective action so that they can get better loan amounts. Maybe they made a purchase they shouldn't have, or maybe they did not pay some money somewhere that they didn't know about. All these things would be very helpful. So enhanced understanding is a very important topic, and transparency. Of course, some of the topics that Tessa just mentioned, personalization is a very important tool. And the other thing is automation. So, for example, a company right now, let's say you have a problem with your computer and you call a number, and some person comes in and goes through the manuals and trying to figure it out, whereas an AI-powered automated tool probably can solve your problem a lot faster. And that is also falls in the realm of automation, would lead to better customer satisfaction. So I would harp on two topics. One is transparency, the other is privacy. Privacy is very important, and third one is automation. So when you drive these AI models, the customer opts out of certain, they're using their data, which GDPR mandates that that companies comply to that, then their personal data should be removed from the model training process, which is, or some data, their personal data, let's say age or credit score or whatever. Then that is important. So transparency, privacy, automation are three key topics I've mentioned.
All right, Martin. So now, suppose we've been doing these things. We're working hard at the transparency and proper governance. Now, how can I leverage that as an organization in terms of the eyes of my consumers and in the world, indeed, to leverage the perception part of responsible AI?
You know, Kevin, we can break this question apart a little bit in how I respond, but you know, ultimately, I think we're looking to deliver better than human experiences for the consumer and better outcomes. The promise of hyper automation is there and can be realized, in the level, or the level of expertise you need today to implement something has been lowered by some of the large language models and the natural language processing capability. I hope that we forget to see the opportunity of the better than human experiences and the hyper automation opportunities to come into play. And if it's just numbers we're looking at, then critical bias has to be part of the equation, right? There's no misunderstanding that we can't leave people behind.
Okay. All right. Very good. We are having some chatting going on and some questions coming in. So I'll try to weave some of these comments and questions in as we go. We will have time later on in the program for your questions, and thank you for your participation, everyone. James says, organizations cannot continue to drag their feet. the public continue to distrust the integrity of AI. I think that's so, generally speaking. Companies researching and developing AI must ensure basic principles and processes are in place to make AI more responsible. Quickly, what are those basic principles? I guess perhaps we've talked a little bit about it, but if we were to pick 3 big principle building blocks that we must include in our policies, what would they be, Tessa?
I have a slightly unusual one, which is about origin and supply chain. I think we forget in the magic of AI about people doing toxicity training, data labeling. We need to be aware of the societal aspects of building these structures. It's been described by some scholars as a form of neocolonialism. So if you're using AI, I absolutely encourage you to look into the source and origin of the tech and what it means for that to work magically for you and what it might cost someone else.
All right, very good. Martin, your top 3 principles that should be included in our policy?
Top 3. Well,
only 3.
I'm going to concur with Tessa with the origin of the data, how it's labeled, where the meta information comes from, and the potential of introducing bias there has to be probably at the top, because data is our gold, and let's mine it appropriately to get the results and the most yield. After that, we have to get into business stakeholder value being delivered to the customer. I have nothing to do with AI if it doesn't deliver a better experience.
And Chanchal, I know you've mentioned already some important principles. Tell us a little bit more about those principles and how they relate to this idea that Martin just brought up of bias.
Absolutely. This is first of all, I want to make sure that I'm not representing NVIDIA at all in this discussion. I'm talking about a whole swath of companies that I've worked before.
All right, very good.
So the main topic, I'd say, number 1 is transparency, number 2 is privacy, number 3 is fairness. It's very hard to say which one is 1, 2, 3. And actually, number 4 is security. That is also security of your data is very important. So I would say, and let's say take any one of these topics, fairness. Fairness is not just in the data. Fairness can be in the model. There could be bias in the model. There could be bias in the data. So therefore, when you evaluate these, you evaluate not just the data, also the model. So you can have a perfectly fair data, but the model might come up with a biased result. Because you may have too few data of one type and too much data of another, which is called an unbalanced situation. So in that situation, the model can come up with a biased result. So it is important to take all these 4 pillars, which is transparency, fairness, security, and privacy, in determining AI, responsible AI.
All right, very good. We have a question coming in that leads us to our first discussion point today. Mike is asking, what does an ethical or responsible AI framework look like? And to what extent is this largely impacted by company culture? And this does lead us to this first point, and it's important. I like to have a framework and a prescriptive model to work from, was certainly something this broad and this important. So what is a prescriptive responsible framework for your enterprise? What should that framework look like? Tessa, what's your framework for us? What would you recommend?
So organizations often start with principles, and they're generally modeled after something like the OECD. So these kind of, privacy, transparency. But I think when you look at the standards that are emerging, so the IEEE, it's really important that we look at governance first, governance and accountability as the place to start with framework building. Who is in charge? What are the models like? And how are you going to deploy meaningful, responsible AI across your organization? And that word meaningful, I want to attach to all of these principles. What is meaningful transparency for the people that you're delivering for? So I think governance and accountability is my starter for 10 on frameworks, but it really does depend on your org, and tailoring it to you is the best way to make it work.
Meaningful. That's interesting. What do you mean by meaningful?
I think it's easy to say that we're going to build transparent AI, but there are instances where you can't be transparent. For example, when you're battling fraudsters, when you're in a technological battle where you're trying to stay ahead of the curve, and you can't be transparent about what you're doing. So what's an appropriate level of explanation, and who is that explanation for? Who is it meant to support? And I think you can ask the same question about all of these principles. I'm keen that we think about who the principles apply to and in what contexts, rather than just these abstract, almost philosophical concepts.
And Chantal, how do we bring scope to all of this? When we talk about AI and automation, it has broad implications on the enterprise and how large it is and how it is applied. When it comes to the technology, how can we bring a meaningful scope and have a project that we can manage that's not so large we cannot manage in our framework? Chantal? Oh, please go ahead and unmute.
Can you hear me?
There you go.
Yeah. I'm not muting or unmuting, somebody else's.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, so anyway, the point is that at the moment in US, we don't have any overriding regulations. There are OCC 2012 and all these, but there is no GDPR in US. So there is a GDPR in EU Act, both in Europe. There are some local or California privacy laws and other Delaware privacy laws, but a lot of these are not mandatory. These are optional. And therefore, there is no overriding. So you can divide this on different pillars of AI and go across market verticals. Or some people would take this on a market vertical by market vertical. Let's say financial services is a very important vertical where responsible AI is important. So there are overriding bodies, SEC, SIFMA, that does regulatory compliance type of thing. So I've been to those meetings, and what I see is that there is no clear guiding principle. And there is also, I didn't feel there was any motivation to create one either. There has been basically things like stress tests, or rather tests of fairness and this and that, but no very clear guiding principle, at least in the US. Whereas Europe has GDPR, which very strongly enforces privacy and security and fairness. So the problem is that each company is addressing it from their business standpoint. So, for example, Meta has Facebook and all of that. There's a lot of public noise about it. So they're taking this along with 4 pillars and going at it head on. Whereas Google is looking at responsible AI as R&D, as technology development, as societal benefits, and the ML research and stuff like that. There are lots of startup companies that are working on this, but they also kind of pivoting either towards responsible AI or away from responsible AI. I saw one company start on responsible AI, moved away to model monitoring. There are other companies, I have some friends which are doing responsible AI, but I don't know how strong a traction they have yet. So I would say the landscape in the US is very scattered, whereas in the Europe, it is more deterministic that you have to comply to these things.
Martin, I can tell you want to jump in there. Go ahead, Martin.
Yeah, so I concur on the, I think the ambiguity part, especially in the US, and that's probably part of the challenge we're going to deal with. But the other side is these regulatory elements, intended to create protections with good intent, also could inhibit innovation. And so we're in the middle of innovation. And I think we're just scratching the surfaces of the potential of where we're calling AI today and where it will be 6 months and 2 years out. The barrier is been dropped, and the potential of making some catastrophic changes or changes that adversely impact the enterprise are great. So it would be good to have a framework, but the ambiguity of that is actually going to be detrimental in the long term.
Correct.
All right. All right, very good. We do have more questions and comments coming in. I'm going to try to weave them in because some of these comments are spot on. Questions are spot on. This one from Rebecca. Thank you, Rebecca. Following up on Chanchel's earlier comment, what is considered fair and ethical behavior pattern is very subjective depending on the group or in question. From the panel's perspective, what can firms do to foster diversity of values and eliminate biases during the initial stages of AI model development? This is very important. Chanchel, your thoughts?
Yeah, so the one I know of is the fairness indicator that was published publicly by Google. There is a blog on it. Katharina Zhu and Tulsi Doshi, they were product managers at Google Research. They published what is called Fairness Indicator, Scalable Infrastructure for Fair ML Systems. This is a very nice blog which talks about a technological approach on determining fairness both in models and in data. Okay, so they say that bias happens in 5 different places: while collecting data, while labeling data, while training using chosen metrics and objectives, when models are deployed in productions, and how the users perceive it. Okay, so these are all places where fairness is important. So I would recommend reading that paper by Google. It will be impossible for me to go through that paper in the next 10 minutes and describe it in detail. The paper is titled Fairness Indicators, Scalable Infrastructure for Fair ML Systems. If there is a chat, I can put it in there, the link to it.
That would be great, Chanchel. If you have a moment to put that in chat, I'll be happy to have that as a reference. I'm still a little unclear myself about this whole issue of bias and what it exactly means. We hear about it, but what is bias and how do we avoid it, and what are the implications, Martin? Can you help me?
Let's reverse it. Let's talk about a bad outcome, and that will paint a picture of bias. About a bad outcome could be Tessa, per se, not getting approved for her mortgage, and I do get approved, and we have the same income, we have similar backgrounds, and the difference is our gender. I mean, definitely gender bias is out there. We want to neutralize that. Half the population, or plus or minus a couple percent, or one gender or the other, or something in between. So you want to make sure that outcomes don't have adverse effect.
Tessa, your thoughts on bias?
Well, I think I mean it's a bit pastiche at this point to point out that bias, it can be good and bad. You make decisions through biases, and particularly in machine learning and data science, bias is how we do this. Is how we do the work. So I think we're looking at discrimination, really. So where there's instances of discrimination against a certain group, and I think that what we're really lacking, and what the FICO report pointed out well, is upskilling in the workforce. We often rely on one expert in the organization who's read, the fairness paper, or IBM's guidance, or Microsoft's guidance. And what we really need is to build a culture where the tools and approaches are set and endorsed and available to all data scientists and data engineers, so that they understand how to look for and detect and anticipate issues with support from their senior management, rather than this reliance on single subject matter experts, which seems to be the approach at the moment.
All right. Hunter is telling me in the background that the link to the Fairness Indicator article is in the chat. So if you're interested in accessing that, it is available now.
Yeah, it's a very nice article. Please read it. I always like objective methods.
Of course, always the best. All right, this comment coming in, or question coming in from James. Speaking of privacy and data protection, has it always been less challenging for companies to demonstrate the origin of the data used in their AI models in light of stringent data regulations like GDPR? That's a kind of a question. What are the linkages between responsible AI and what we already are in place with things like GDPR? Martin, do you have a thought on that for us?
I'm having some technical challenges. Your question broke up on me.
Okay, I guess my question is, how can we bridge the linkages between things like GDPR, which is already in place, and responsible AI?
Yeah, so I think I could break that apart in terms of privilege, access, anonymization of personally identifiable data, and that should be part of anybody's data program. So, using technology as a leverage point to insulate information that's uniquely identifiable to an individual is huge. Where it's obfuscated, it takes a special key, and for training purposes of models, that's the other key point to bring out here is models need to be retrained and what triggers a retraining. And this is an area that I've personally witnessed where your data may go awry or drift on you, and the model then drift on you, and the outcome isn't what you expect to bring the business value. So models as created aren't necessarily static, and that's one of the places where business stakeholder value needs to be brought in and brought up to speed, that this is a continuum and not just a static process.
Correct. That's a very
Tessa,
good
I
point.
could tell you one comment. Tessa?
I'm sorry, I'm also having some technical difficulties.
Okay.
The sound
right.
is very in and out.
Very good. Well, then I'll move to Chantel. Chantel, I could also tell that you wanted to comment. Please jump in as you wish.
That's an excellent point. This is a whole area of research that I personally participated in quite a bit while I was at Google, which is model monitoring. The model monitoring talks about drift, which is called the training serving skew. You train the data with a certain set of data, and you find out that the data drifted. And therefore, once you have new data and you're retraining the model, you'll have to make sure all the pillars of responsible AI are still fulfilled, which is privacy, security, transparency, and fairness. And therefore, this is a continuous process. The other is prediction skew, which is also another reason to retrain the model. So whenever you retrain the model, which sometimes happens nightly or several times a day in many cases, especially like recommendation models are trained multiple times, even during a day. And therefore, all these pillars will have to be evaluated every time you train the model with new data.
All right, very good. Well, let's continue to move on because we are starting to run short of time. But I wanted to ask about our next discussion point today, and that is communicating AI risks to the board and creating awareness across the enterprise. Look, users often tell me that they have difficulty getting a seat at the table and getting awareness and the support they need from the C-suite. So what is your advice for AI experts and technology change agents to advance responsible AI in the C-suite? Tessa?
I think having lines of understanding is really important, almost as often a sort of offhanding of being like, I, as a C-suite exec, I'm not technical enough. I don't understand. I'm gonna hand this off. And I think it's really important that we take this opportunity to upskill everybody, that we are doing AI ethics at every level, that everybody is thinking about what this means for their role and what this means for them, so that we reduce this communication problem. We've already talked about bias, model drift, differential privacy. You don't have to know the details of these topics to have an awareness and to be able to make executive decisions about this. So I think this is everybody's responsibility and everybody's job. And I don't want to see responsible AI tacked on anywhere.
Right, not an afterthought. Martin, what is your advice for technologists and change agents to create and gain awareness about the risks of AI to the board?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's all about awareness. Let's just be open and have a conversation about the potential risks and bias considerations that could come in, things that may actually need to be prioritized, get raised up so the board's aware. There's some complexity. There's buy versus build decisions, challenging to identify and address issues that could be of bias or risk to ethical issues, and those have to be always on top. You also may have limited resources to implement these programs, so sometimes things can fall in a crack in a large organization where it's not clear where the line of demarcation is. So stakeholder value from the top has to be there everywhere in the process.
Interesting. All right. And Chantel, your experience communicating risks to the board, getting the awareness that we need. Are you surprised that there seems to be a lack of awareness in the C-suite, or are we off base with that?
No, that's not true. It depends on the company. There is a huge amount of awareness in many of the companies that are dealing directly with consumers, especially in the social media space. Take it whether Meta or whatever, those companies are extremely conscious of this. They have large groups of people and teams working on responsible AI. They have made public declarations of that very clearly, and I'm only quoting public sources. The companies like Google have also have, by the way, Google TensorFlow has fairness indicators. I just posted the GitHub of TensorFlow fairness indicators. So all these companies are very, very aware of this, and they have taken up strong initiatives. They've even included fairness and bias and transparency, all of that, into their TensorFlow releases. In terms of smaller companies, the landscape, like I said in the beginning, and Martin resonated that the landscape is very fragmented, and therefore it is every company is doing it their own way, and especially those who are touching the public are more conscious of it. B2B companies are less conscious of it.
Okay, very good. All right. Well, listen, I do want to get to our last discussion point just briefly, and it's about blockchain. I am not an expert in blockchain.
Who is?
The discussion point is leveraging blockchain technology to deliver responsible AI. Anyone care to jump in on blockchain and how it can be used to deliver responsible AI?
I actually haven't seen an application of blockchain used to deliver responsible AI. And it feels like one of those, when people say, I just want to use the new shiny thing, like, let's use blockchain. Right. There are ways to do this that are, the responsible AI is so foundational that I think if you're at the point where you're thinking, I'm using blockchain to do it, but you haven't got like an AI governance process in place, I'd maybe take a few steps back.
Martin, what do you have to say?
Okay,
Martin's busting at the seams. He loves blockchain.
I know, he's jumping up and down.
No, I've got my personal NFTs ready to
all right.
all our users individually. Think of one of the applications might be the federation and security of the data, and knowing it's not being violated and shared fairly. That I think is very clear, and as an application. Now with that application, you also create other latency challenges, but there is an application for blockchain.
We are here with Martin Miller, Chanchal Chatterjee, and Tessa Derbyshire. If you have any questions for our panel today, now would be a great time to put them into the Q&A feature as we start rounding towards our Q&A portion of the event today. So please feel free to jump in with your questions and comments. But I will get back to Chanchal about this whole idea of using blockchain to deliver responsible AI. Chanchal, what has been your experience with this?
You just hit my soft underbelly. I really have zero knowledge of blockchain. I never invested in it. I never bought any of the Dogecoins or Bitcoins, and thankfully I didn't. The problem with blockchain is that it is another star of the sun, which is farther than Pluto, when here on Earth we haven't solved the basic problems with the general responsible AI. Every company is doing it their own way, B2B, B2C, whatever, doing differently. So let's solve the problem at hand before we go out there at Uranus or Pluto or further beyond in the atmosphere.
All right.
Solar system.
Fair enough. Let's deal with what we have today. All right.
Start at level 1 and then work your way up to blockchain.
Correct. We need proper regulations. We need proper framework. Let's forget regulations. Nobody wants regulations. Tech companies certainly hate regulation because, like Martin said, it stops innovation. What we really want is that, like Elon said, stop the AI progress, and next day starts the AI company, right? It's so contradictory.
Don't even get me started on Elon.
Anyway, I'm not trying to bring that topic up. I'm just saying people are all over the map. We do need to have a proper framework, and maybe the right approach is to go market vertical by market vertical. In the financial services, we have SEC and SIFMA, which are governance bodies, can certainly do that. And then we go down from there, industry by industry. Retail might be next. You see what I mean? And then we can go from there.
Won't it take some sort of regulation and legislation to really button down responsible AI?
I think it is more important to have a framework, a guiding principle, rather than regulation would be my personal voice, because regulation are very high level, like GDPR, which drives down frameworks, but it would be important for tech companies and governments to sit down together and say, we are going to use the fairness indicators for all models or something like that. This particular tool has to be run every time. Something like that would be nice to have.
I don't know. Is that enough, Martin?
Well, I think I'm going to stand by not wanting to break innovation, but I do believe there's areas that need to be regulated, and I think if there's a life-changing event created from a model, there's a clear and present area for looking at these kind of challenges, Kevin. And think about doing surgery, and a model is part of that. Think of diagnosis of an ailment, definitely in that area. I think there could be some fixed model evaluation points, and we could have a quality score for those. Now we talk about commerce. I mean, all bets off, because let's just say it, not everybody's going to play by the rules.
No. Well, and Tessa in the UK is leading the way with some of the regulations that have been recently put into place. Do you feel that's the right direction, or what are your thoughts?
It's interesting. The UK approach is looking like it will be somewhere between the EU and the US in terms of the risk frameworks and allowing domains to set their risk categories, which I think is an interesting approach. But I do think it's important, we look at things like the Dutch childcare benefits algorithm. People's lives are being severely impacted by these technologies. And whilst we don't want to stifle innovation, it does need to be safe. So I agree with Martin that where we are looking at crucial life decisions, we need to be much more careful. And those things are regulated already. So we're building on what's already there to take care of this new technology, this new approach.
All right, very good. We are here today with Tessa Derbyshire, Chanchal Chatterjee, and Martin Miller. We've been talking about responsible AI, and in just a few minutes that we have left, I would like to open it up to our action item round today. I was hoping each of you would provide us with one quick action item that we can use to take advantage of your ideas and advice today. Chanchal, 60 seconds. What is your action item for us today?
I would start with the financial services industry and would like to have a framework from the governing bodies.
All right.
A guidance, proper guidance.
Right. Very good. And Martin, your action item for us today?
Yeah, I think C-suite buy-in from the top of what we're trying to invest in, what's the outcome we desire, how we measure that progressively, is part of that framework. And without that, it's just a bunch of tech kids in the corner playing. And so we want to make sure that they're not lost in what they're trying to achieve.
All right. And finally, Tessa, what is your action item for us today?
Don't rely too heavily on principles. Go and find out what's actually happening in your org and work out what needs to be done to support the staff in delivering responsible programs in what's currently going on, never mind your 5-10-year plan.
All right. I want to thank our expert panel today. It's been a great discussion. Martin Miller, Chanchal Chatterjee, Tessa Derbyshire, thank you so much for being with us today. You've been a great panel. Your perspectives and advice were spot on, so I hope we get a chance to talk again soon. And thank you to everyone joining us today. Join us next time, 4:25 at 1600 British Standard Time, when we will talk with another great panel of experts about developing a transformation strategy that optimizes your digital investments. It should be another great discussion. So please join us then. And if you'd like to find me, you can do so at LinkedIn. I'm happy to connect there. You can check me out and find me also at my weekly audio podcast, the Digital Transformation Podcast. But for that, That'll do us for this episode of Digital Transformation Talk. And until next time, I'm Kevin Crane. Thank you for watching.